I want to tell you about the moment I realized being underestimated can either break you or quietly turn you into something dangerous, dangerous in the best possible way. It happened on a random Tuesday afternoon under flickering fluorescent lights with a man smiling at me like I was invisible. He laughed first. That's important, because a year later, he wasn't laughing anymore. I was. Back then, my life looked small from the outside. I was working the front desk at a logistics company in Phoenix, low pay, long hours, name badge, slightly crooked no matter how often I fixed it. People assumed I was there because I had no other options. Maybe I sounded too polite. Maybe I didn't dress like someone with ambition. Or maybe, I didn't fight to be seen. I just did my job, kept my head down, and went home exhausted every night wondering if this was it. My boss, or at least the man who acted like my boss, was named Derek Holt. Not his real name, obviously. He wore tailored suits, talked loud, and had this habit of calling people buddy when he wanted to remind them who was on top. The first time he really noticed me, was when a shipment got delayed because of a routing error. Not my error, but that didn't matter. He leaned over my desk, tapped the paperwork, and said, "You know, this is why we don't put big responsibilities on front desk guys." Front desk guys, plural, like I was a category, not a person. People nearby laughed. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. Inside, something folded in on itself. That became the pattern. Derek talked over me in meetings I wasn't even supposed to be in. Took credit for ideas he overheard me explaining to coworkers. Once, when a client praised how smoothly a crisis was handled, Derek clapped me on the shoulder and said, "See what happens when you follow instructions." Yeah, that happened. And every time I swallowed it, I told myself it was temporary. I told myself patience was maturity. What I didn't tell myself was how angry I was becoming. Quiet anger. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that watches, listens, remembers. At night after my shift, I started teaching myself things Derek assumed I couldn't understand. Supply chain analytics, contract law, basics, software. The operations team used but never bothered to explain to me. I watched tutorials while eating microwaved dinners. I took notes on my phone during lunch breaks. I learned how decisions were actually made and who was really doing the work. I didn't tell anyone. That part matters. Because when people think you're harmless, they don't guard themselves. The turning point came 6 months later during a regional audit. Big deal. Executives flying in. Derek was pacing like a caged animal. Something was wrong, I could tell. Late shipments missing documentation numbers that didn't quite line up. He brushed past my desk without a word, which was unusual. Normally, he loved an audience. That afternoon, one of the auditors asked me a question. Just a simple one about a shipment reroute from the previous quarter. Derek started to answer for me, confident, smooth, completely wrong. I felt my heart pounding. This was the moment where you either stay small or step into trouble. I cleared my throat and said, "That's not accurate." The room went quiet. Derek turned slowly, smiling that tight smile. "Excuse me," he said. I repeated myself calmly and explained exactly what had happened, why the reroute occurred, and which approval email documented the decision. I even pulled it up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. The auditor nodded. Derek didn't. After they left, he cornered me near the break room. "You embarrassed me," he said. Voice low. "You should know your place." I looked at him and felt something shift. Not fear. Clarity. I said I did my job. He laughed. But it wasn't confident anymore. It was brittle. From that day on, the tension was thick. Derek started nitpicking my work, documenting nonsense, trying to build a case. What he didn't realize was that every email he sent, every shortcut he took, every rule he bent, I noticed. And I kept records. Not out of revenge, out of self-respect. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Quarterly review. Senior leadership present. Derek was presenting growth projections. Numbers I recognized. Numbers that were optimistic. Fabricated honestly. He talked fast, confident as ever, until one executive asked about risk mitigation. Derek froze. Just for a second. Long enough. I raised my hand. You could feel the room tense. Derek shot me a look that said, "Don't you dare." I dared. I asked a question, framed it as curiosity. Can you clarify how these projections account for the unresolved compliance flags from the Southwest region? Silence. Derek stammered. I followed up calmly, laying out the discrepancies, the emails, the dates. I wasn't accusing. I was explaining. The executive asked me to stay after the meeting. Derek didn't look at me when he left. 2 weeks later, Derek was gone. Officially, it was a mutual separation. Unofficially, everyone knew. I was offered a role I hadn't even applied for. Operations coordinator, pay bump, office with a door. When they handed me the offer letter, my hands were shaking. Here's the thing, though. The victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt quiet, satisfying, like standing up straight after being hunched over for years. A month later, I ran into Derek at a coffee shop. He looked smaller somehow, less polished. He saw me, hesitated, then said, "Guess you landed on your feet." I smiled and said I was always standing. "You just weren't looking." He didn't respond. Now, I want to be honest. This isn't a fairy tale. I didn't become a millionaire overnight. People didn't suddenly respect me because of a title. Some still underestimate me. That's fine. I've learned something important. Being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it is. I used to think justice was loud, public, dramatic. Now I think it's often quiet. It looks like preparation. It looks like patience. It looks like knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. And it raises a question I still wrestle with. Was I right to wait? Should I have stood up sooner, or did waiting give me the leverage I needed to actually change my situation? I don't know. What I do know is this. The people who judge you the fastest often understand you the least. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever been dismissed, talked down to treated like you didn't matter only to prove everyone wrong later? Or do you think staying quiet for too long lets people get away with too much? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you stand. Because stories like this don't end with one person winning. They keep going every time someone decides they're done being invisible.